Hello, I'm Nina, and in today's episode of Comments, I will be discussing the issuing of tasers to police officers. This is episode 2 of Comments. I'm Nina, and today I'm going to be talking about my thoughts on the recent murder of PC Andrew Harper and the consequent issuing of tasers for the police forces across the country. Now, PC Andrew Harper, tributes were paid to him at 11 o'clock by people, a minute of silence, and it just highlights that how much at risk our police officers are putting themselves in when investigating even what one may consider not to be such a serious crime, such as a burglary. Now, inevitably, he was died of multiple injuries after being dragged along the road by the accused, Jed Foster. And in the course of their investigations, the police have actually arrested. It's just mind-boggling. A group of up to about 10 young men and boys between the ages of, I think the youngest is about 10, that's been questioned. And Jed Foster, the actual accused, is only 20. So such a large group of people involved in the actual burglary, and which is just of a country house. And in the course of investigating this, a life has been lost. And not only that, members of PC Harper's family are obviously suffering, especially his wife, losing a son. I think he was only about 28, very young, and only married 4 weeks to his wife, Lizzie. So she must, this is the devastating impact when we see police officers in uniform. However, behind the uniform, there is a person with family and loved ones, and in actual fact, he seems to have had a lot of support from his fellow colleagues. So it's obviously very difficult to deny that the police have to be issued tasers. The escalating violence that they're being subjected to, especially with the increase of individuals carrying knives, just as I discussed in the first episode, this is something, it's not a new phenomena of potential criminals carrying weapons. It's the fact that they're actually the age and their intention to use it, even in the most sort of minor of disagreements. Their stabbings are occurring over feuds of £10 notes, debts, and rebuffing from not providing a cigarette when requested, standing outside and walking along the street in an argument over something trivial. So it's inevitable that we are going to be hearing possibly of more assaults on police officers, which can be fairly serious. This was fatal for PC Harper, and it's astonishing to find out and discover that the people, the young boys and men being questioned, the youngest is only aged about 10 years old. And it shows that more needs to be done for young people, whether it's youth centres or whether it's just intervention in schools. There is a void and a vacuum that needs to be filled to stop young men, boys, being imbued in and involved in crime, and whether they're doing it just through observing or being on the fringes. However, the fact that they are still exposed to crime, such as these young boys were, and collectively they're all culpable, really, although only one person has specifically been charged, Jed Foster, who was responsible for driving the van which dragged PC Harper along the road, and from which he's died from multiple injuries sustained. Now, my personal point of view, had you asked me back in 2017, I totally disagreed with the issuing of taser guns by the then Home Secretary Amber Rudd. However, it's against, I think at the time it was quite controversial because, again, with stop and search, it's one of those issues which you always feel that what's next, this can, is it necessary? However, in light of recent news of escalating crime, the police force and police officers, it's like any responsible employer. The chief, recently, the chief constable of Northamptonshire police force has guaranteed that each member or frontline officer will be issued a taser. However, it's up to them to select whether they want to have one issued or not, which is voluntary. Their usage is not mandatory. So I suppose that option is a good caveat, I suppose, for those who may still be struggling with using one. Now, the fact that the equipment is expensive, it's going to cost apparently £220,000 and this is just for the police officers in Northamptonshire. However, it's as in every workplace, they are responsible for the safety of their employees, and I think the thing is, as members of the public, we forget that each day that a police officer goes out to investigate a potential crime, there will be a possibility of a confrontation, and that confrontation, if it escalates and the assailants are carrying a weapon, a knife, or even, which is becoming more and more common, even a gun, that they need to be able to disable that individual or individuals involved without causing harm to themselves. And really, it's a factor that needs to be considered, that the police officers are actually responding to incidences which are becoming increasingly dangerous. And at the maybe 10 years ago, you would never have considered it necessity for a police officer to be carrying a taser. However, my point of view has changed. Again, as I said, it's just a reflection of how responding to recent events, and the risks have catapulted, especially if officers are struggling to physically restrain an individual, then they need to have a taser issued just in case. they do have a weapon which they will have the intention of utilising and causing harm. However, there does need to be a certain degree of, shall we say, scrutiny about the usage of tasers, which is really has been sort of implemented, I suppose, when there were first issues. So officers, they need to record the location and the outcome of every incident in which a taser is used. And, they need to keep a record of the age and ethnicity of upon whom the taser has been utilised. So I suppose, again, keeping a record is useful because, again, these can be evaluated to ensure that they are compliant and used in an appropriate manner and not excessively. Tasers are controversial, however, it's inevitable that they need to be utilised now, and it's inevitable and a necessity for, I think, all police officers, despite the costs involved, to now offer to issue every frontline officer with these new weapons, as long as there are properly, all incidences are properly recorded. And critics may say that it's infringing individuals' human rights. However, increased monitoring and recording, tightening up the regulations around it will inevitably mitigate any sort of excessive usage of them, and also whilst still simultaneously protecting the officers in their line of duty. Okay, so until next time, bye. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. You can subscribe to the Comments podcast via iTunes, Spotify and other major providers.